Skite recently posted a fantastic video about the impossible Easter egg in which the main big reveal is that his community found one of the constellations from the infamous, the giant KN-44 hypercube blueprint on the computer screens in the church area of Der Eisendrache. These screens cycle through a few different shots, but the one that has the constellations in is the Maxis projector room. This is especially significant considering this is the very spot where there's the alchemical framework of the luminiferous ether book, part of the collection of the 24 coloured books, which is our best bet for making up some kind of decipher for the impossible Easter egg. And it's also the room that contains a KN-44 wall-by. Now I really do not know what this could possibly mean, and it is so shocking that after all of these years, no one has stumbled along it. But it is a very small section of the screen that's hardly noticeable, so I guess it is understandable, but we have rinsed these maps dry through the years. In fact, I have the texture file for the image on screen now, so you can see it even better. There is one constellation in the top right on the wall, which is the main one because it really resembles the one on the KN-44 blueprint, but inverted / at a rotation, which does make sense since this is surveillance footage, so it should be inverted. And then there is one on the floor as well that doesn't seem to match any of the ones on the blueprint. The fact that there is two and not just one I think gives this further credence. To further solidify its importance, I've checked the last gen version of the map, which if you are unaware often includes Easter egg or story important things as bare minimums to be able to view due to the hardware constraints, and this is how Glitching Queen also thought the books are important, since they all appear on last gen 2, even in rooms where there's barely any other props. But unfortunately, the constellations do not appear on the last gen versions of the monitors, which may suggest that it may not be that important and might just be a cool reference or the developers messing with us. Regardless, what's interesting as well is that neither of these constellations are specifically on the area of the map that the surveillance camera is showing footage of, but are instead exclusive to the monitor image. It's weird as well because checking the room, the surveillance camera is actually above the shot where the footage is coming from itself, meaning that the camera should actually be showing the opposite side of the room to this one, but I think this is most likely just a mistake, unless this is supposed to show some sort of alternative reality where things are just slightly warped from this iteration, since it is a fracture. There are numerous possibilities for what this could mean. One, this could be part of a cut Easter egg and the surveillance footage was taken of the outdated version of the map. For example, in the recently leaked developer documents, we know there was planned to be another Dr. Monty scraps of paper Easter egg on the map, but it never made it into the release version. Maybe this had something to do with it. 2. Maybe that Easter egg was cut because they saw how much the community was latching on to the KN-44 hypercube, and so wanted to do a more elaborate Easter egg than just hiding scraps once again, and so may have used different methods to hide things across the game, such as in this computer screen, and maybe there are other screens, textures, paintings, etc. hiding little snippets in other areas of the map / game that we need to find. 3. Maybe this is just a troll. We know the developers told Glitching Queen that the KN-44 was just an inside joke, as they put it, and they kept using it repeatedly because we, the community, latched onto it so much so. Maybe a developer just decided to be cheeky and randomly slotted this in without it having any meaning beyond that. 4th and finally, this isn't meant to be part of a collection of similar instances we need to find, but is instead just a hint towards this being the book location, of which its name, alchemical framework of the luminiferous ether, would tie directly into the constellations being shown. Let me know which idea you are most on board with, or if you have any of your own ideas or suggestions in the comment section down below. In fact, the wormholes and constellations we see on the Giant's blueprint, which were just recreations from stock images, do really remind me of the symbol for the wall running in Der Eisendrache / various of the imagery on the computers or the scraps of papers. Beyond this, I don't really have any other ideas for what this could mean. I really feel it could either be everything or nothing and no in between. It's so hard to say, but I think the best thing we can do for now is to keep trying to look for similar things across the maps in the game. If more are found, this is definitely something important. Skite also mentions in his video that he wasn't initially sure if the Der Eisendrache books are part of any cipher because all all of the ciphers are clearly written out for each map in the documents. That's just not true though. These are all of the obvious ciphers around the maps. There are many instances of Morse codes or hidden messages around the maps that the documents do not clearly spell out. An example of this is looking at the World at War biography message that we only solved because Blundell gave it away to Dalek before Black Ops 3 released, probably to clue us in on the kind of idea he has or had in mind for the impossible Easter egg, and there are no documents for this either. Also, without spelling out the specific person whose hard drive was seemingly stolen and where the leaks are coming from, this person would not have access to all of the Zombies documents. Besides, the impossible Easter egg is not going to be something clearly spelled out in the documents, when it's so secretive and Blundell didn't want it to leak out. A cipher is really the only thing it could be even, something that cannot be data mined, because a message hidden in a much less obvious way than the blatant cipher papers around the maps is the only way Blundell could have gotten around data mining, and it not be something as simple as a regular cipher. Even just the books themselves and their deliberate placing screams importance. There are so many of them, and they are all placed at such obvious positions to me that you naturally stumble along them when you are interacting with the map. I'm so surprised that it took us all of these years to really begin discussing these books with just how much they seem to stick out to me on the maps now with hindsight. And if it is not part of some sort of cipher, then I don't think they would just be there for some sort of storyline teaser. Some of them are teasing Black Ops 4 Zombies maps / cut maps probably for Zombies Chronicles 2, such as Transit, Buried, or Tagged a Toten, but the ones that are teasing Black Ops 4 are only a small part of what the books represent. Most of them you can't really gauge much from them unless it is part of something larger. Why go through all of the effort of creating 24 names if it wasn't to be a part of a cipher or something along those lines? Especially when John Dee is famously known for his incredibly difficult ciphers. And this is the best thing that matches all of Blundell's comments about it being hidden across arenas. This is literally hidden across arenas along the map, and all of the other D clues that I discussed in the last video once again match Blundell's clues of being hidden across the arenas. It's not just hidden across a map, it's hidden across the entire game and its narrative branches. The next thing that I want to discuss regarding Sky's video is about a few other things that we simultaneously discovered. Basically, both of our videos were in production at the exact same time, but mine ended up coming out a day earlier than his by pure coincidence. I had recorded it before Shadowvale release, but due to my lengthy coverage of that map, it obviously pushed back my ability to get it finished. The first thing we both latch onto is regarding John Dee's own supposed first interpretations of a 4D space or hypercube, although it was never officially called as such. In essence, the concept of 4D geometry did not exist by Dee's time, as he was an occultist to Queen Elizabeth I living in the 15 to 1600s. However, his concept of Monas Hieroglyphica, which I discussed in more depth in my previous videos, is a glyph that combines mathematics, alchemy, Kabbalah, and Neoplatonism to explain the geometric and numerological significance of the universe, portraying it as a key to understanding the unity of the cosmos. Dee explores the Monas as a universal symbol, linking planetary, elemental, and spiritual concepts through intricate diagrams and theorems, blending rigorous geometry with esoteric philosophy. In my last video, I discovered an image online that looks eerily similar to said KN44 hypercube, although it's never officially called as such and not meant to be one, but could be interpreted as such through a modern lens of 4-dimensional spaces, which is what some believe the glyph from Monas Hieroglyphica to represent now. But it's essentially the same as what Sky discusses using different verbiage. I had actually read all of or similar resources Sky discusses in his video, but couldn't find a way to articulate it as clearly as he does. From my own research though about this map specifically, the paramount key is that it's essentially a map of tarot cards with 6 different colours, and the 24 books under Eisendrach are similarly a collection of 6 different colours, each with 4. The notes on the image also advise checking out a book called Tarot, The Wisdom of the Ages by Dr. Paul Foster Case. This is especially significant because it's similar to one of the book titles, Sage Wisdom for the Ages. And it gets even crazier when we look up the suggested book itself, because its official title is Tarot, A Key to the Wisdom of the Ages. This means that this is a shortened version of the book name, which Treyarch seems to have copied for the Der Eisendrach book. The fact they put a similar title to this in the shortened version and not the actual name suggests to me that they were looking at this very image when designing it, or use the shortened version because it ties into how you actually solve the cipher. The longer version wouldn't fit in. I discussed this more in detail in the prior video, so I would really urge you to check that out, but essentially, I'm not sure where to go from here, but I propose that maybe we have to align the book titles by specific colours along the quote-unquote hypercube, although it's not one, similar to this image to help solve the cipher. The following thing I want to talk about is Sky's dismissal of a lot of the current community speculation around the impossible Easter egg. To boil it down, in short, he doesn't think that Blundell's hidden in the vault comment means anything. That Glitching Queen initially discussed in her first video on the John Dee books, and I'm fully on board with this being a teaser as well.
You can ask me all you want. I'm going to put that away in a vault and talk to you again about it in 8 years' time.
Okay, and by then we'll be old and growing beards.
Yeah, exactly.
He thinks that Blundell says a lot of odd phrasing in interviews sometimes, and because we are all so hyper-obsessed with trying to solve this thing, and due to his intentionally cryptic nature in interviews, it leads us to trying to find things from nothing in a lot of instances. For example, he believes Blundell's recent dead and buried quote doesn't mean anything.
And Jeff, to be honest, if I have my way, I'll be dead and buried and there'll still be stuff in there, and I'll be quite happy.
I agree with this for his recent interview, that is. When people saw that clip, they immediately thought he must be referencing the Martha Buried. Blundell obviously is not teasing things in every sentence, and it is impossible to truly know when he's teasing something or not, for sure. I did use this specific clip in the intro for part 2, overlaying a John Dee grave on the quote, not because I thought he was actually teasing that, but I just thought it was a cool introduction, and the interview was posted literally the very second I finished editing the video, so the timing just seemed to align perfectly, that I had to include that clip. As Sky points out, there are times when Blundell is very obviously teasing something, such as this one.
The only thing I would say, because you said you don't want any hints, sure, you know, I don't want to cause a rumble.
But there are so many instances when he's not being obvious. Even, for example, the instance he brings up of an obvious one is when Blundell was blinking like crazy in an old interview with Mr. Waffles, which then people translated into Morse code and thought that they could actually get something from it. But even that alone I don't think is an obvious thing. People were joking about it in the comments at the time, but most people just thought it was completely crazy, and even still to this day people think it's completely crazy or coincidental. Most people are not on board with it, at least as far as I'm aware. And to be honest, this craziness is the magic of Call of Duty Zombies. I mean, even looking at the Call of Duty Zombies timeline itself, so much of that is made up of our own theories. A big one is that the documents do actually confirm the painting that we now know to be Arthur, aka Leroy from Buried, under Eisendrache was actually meant to be the Wolf King's wife. However, when we saw this, a lot of the community started thinking it is actually Leroy, and I was one of those people. I made a video on it at the time. It actually has the most views out of any of the videos on that topic. There were some people saying it's clearly a woman, and I was just looking at that painting for so long, and I just could not see it in my head. To me, it just looked exactly like Arthur, and still, even when I'm looking at that image, I still cannot not see Arthur. But then, when Treyarch released the Kronorium, they officially canonized it as being Arthur, but that was never the intention, so it shows that even our own craziness can end up being important because we are part of the ether. We are shaping the storyline as much as the writers are, and all playing such an integral role in it. And that's why I think even if we're completely off the mark with all of these storyline theories, it doesn't matter. It's fun having the discussions, and Treyarch, if they like the idea enough and it fits in with what they are doing, will take it and run with it. And I don't think there's many other games that function like this, that are so community driven. I don't think we should be so dismissive of this phrasing when the very John Dee book is hidden within a vault. I really do think this was a teaser for it, and it's just pointless saying it isn't when we don't know. And he was talking about the impossible Easter egg specifically in this section, so surely would have been cautious of his phrasing. Especially when this is the very same quote where he teases hiding it away for 8 years. And this is something that Sky has latched onto. He very much believes that the 8 years comment is going to prove to be something important, and we are nearing closer to the 8-year anniversary of that interview. So is Blundell about to tease something for this Easter egg? Perhaps, but at the same time, perhaps not. But how can we know for sure which things to take from this sentence as having meaning and which things to not? There's no real way, unless when it's a very obvious instance, when he directly looks at the camera or winks or narrows his eyebrows or whatever. I 100% agree with Sky that all of us are definitely looking too deeply into some things. Sky is, I am, literally every single person I guarantee has relayed some complete bullshit in their videos. But there's probably been some truth hidden amongst against it as well. That's inevitable when we are searching for something famously referred to as being impossible. We need to throw out as many suggestions out there as possible for the greatest chance that some of them are actually something. I mean, for all we know, the KN-44 is absolutely nothing. We have no way of saying for sure. All we can do is speculate based on the leaks as well as the in-game evidence, and that increases our odds of actually landing something genuine. That's what I tried to do with my part 2 1-hour 15-minute video. There was so much evidence of Monty and John Dee contained within. I am well aware that some is definitely reaching, but there is so much stacked in there that I believe it becomes undeniable that Monty is John Dee, with his reading from the perspective of Prospero from Shakespeare's The Tempest, a character who many believe to be an interpretation or defense of John Dee, the very D referenced in these books. Other things I discussed, such as Monas Hieroglyphicus symbol looking like the Keeper Staff, the Griffin Mombasis books, especially considering they are all over the map and not just in the vault, or Monty's Duck Lake quote hinting at Mort Lake, I definitely think all of these instances are massive reaches. Like I said, I was just trying to combine as many connections as possible, knowing full well that some are mere coincidence, unintentional, or I'm looking way too deep into things for answers where or when there aren't any. But the big ones I revealed, and sheer quantity of them, is what makes it so compelling. I think without the Tempest reading, the whole theory falls apart, but that's by far the biggest connection. And this is where I want to bring up the second thing both Skyt and I discovered on our own accord and discussed in both the videos, the missing book, Artifacts of Legend. As Skyt and I both bring up, in the leaked document there is the full list of all of the Der Eisendrache book names. However, there is one that is absent on the actual release version, Artifacts of Legend. Sky uses this as evidence to say that things get cut all of the time, and uses this as evidence to say that the ranking document that I found and discussed that talks about John Dee in the in-game story discovering ripples in the ether, communicating with angels, founding the Order of De-Resurrectionists, and then ascending to immortality instead of dying, is actually probably just a cut story idea that never made it. I vehemently disagree with this assertion. Firstly, like I talked about in my video, and context that Skyt is missing, is that there are 2 John Dee De-Resurrectionist books on Der Eisendrache. One in Groff's vault, and one in the very same vault room when not teleporting. This is especially important because it could hint at this being a mistake. It could be that Treyarch wanted to place the D book in the vault because it's the most important one out of the collection, so they wanted to highlight that by hiding it away and have us directly look at it when doing the main quest. And the Artifacts of Legend book was originally going to be placed here. Perhaps when they changed it for the D book, they could have forgotten to then swap the other D book with the Artifacts of Legend, leading to duplicates. This may be why we've not been able to solve it thus far, because Treyarch might have made a mistake. You might say, well, if this really is the impossible Easter egg, they would have surely been thorough enough to not make this mistake, but Treyarch make mistakes all of the time. They are only human after all. E.g., the spork knife on Blood of the Dead wasn't actually in the game and working until a couple months after release because it wasn't properly coded in. Or even a more recent example in Black Ops 6, they messed up the date of the inversion warheads being sent to the Pacific in Outbreak as putting the date of Firebase C. You have to understand, it's very clear that little to no people at Treyarch actually know what the impossible Easter egg is, and maybe just Blundell himself, or just his inner circle, actually knew what he was up to. He would have been tasking people to do things for it without cluing them in on what it's for, meaning that whoever was tasked to put the book's names in could have easily accidentally put a duplicate. I mean, even some of the Black Ops 3 ciphers themselves have had some mistakes in them that have made them harder to solve, and it's speculated that there may be some mistakes in some of the unsolved ones, making them harder to crack as well. Lastly, I still very much believe that Dr. Monty is meant to be John Dee himself. I actually believe it's more of a reach to say that he isn't, or there isn't enough evidence than otherwise. Even Skyt thinking Dee created the first concept of a hypercube is more evidence that he's Monty, since Monty is the very one who created that blueprint and is seemingly how he manifests war weapons and other items through the Veil. To put it plainly, I strongly disagree with Skyt's assertion that the late John Dee document is just a cut concept, just an early idea or one that didn't make it, because it literally did make it into the release release version of the game. It's literally right there, slap bang in the ranking system. The calling card literally shows the crown granting the order for the Dee Resurrectionists. The Der Eisendrache books literally reference occultism in the court of Queen Elizabeth, and the main book is John Dee's Dee Resurrectionists. It's right there in the game. This is not at all cut, and I don't know how anyone can look at this and say it is cut. All of the ranks in the document as well are exactly the same as the release version. I could see the exact passage not being verbatim, as is what's supposed to be the canon in the launch version of the game. However, I think some of that idea at least has made it into the release version, considering the fact that all of this is literally referenced there directly in the game. Yes, the documents contain a ton of cut content or ideas that never made it, but this I believe is not one of them. I've been unpacking many of those cut ideas in other videos, and it's very clear when something is still meant to be considered canon or not. E.g., all of the new Der Eisendrache revelations match everything in the game canon, proving that's not cut stuff but just content not fully expanded on in the map itself, and the documents help serving as the connective tissue. It was even something hinted at by Blundell in again a Mr. Waffles interview.
Does the Maxis of the Der Eisendrache universe know about the moon base in Der Eisendrache?
Yes.
So there's a distinction there between that Maxis' knowledge and the Maxis in the Black Ops 1 story arc.
Pass.
Okay.
This, I believe, is a similar scenario. A good example of something that is obviously cut is the grandfathers of Ultimus that Primus initially were concepted as on Origins. Initially, we were not going to see alternative versions of the crew. Instead, we would see their lineage, and there would be backstory of their great ancestors having fought in the Great War. That obviously never made it into the release version of the game. Sky also says Monty being John Dee before joining the Keepers doesn't align with the Kronorium. But that's the very point I explored in part 2. Dr. Monty's comments of time being linear until the characters teleported for the first time completely contradicts the Kronorium, or at the very least the Kronorium does not properly expand on it / negates important details, which happens a lot within it as it often serves as a summary as opposed to an extensive retelling of all events. Monty's comments about teleportation fracturing the universe completely aligns with the Elite D ranking documents concept. It's the very same thing. These ripples through the ether from the first teleportation experiments are the very reason why D, I believe, eventually was then taken by the Keepers. The Kronorium also only depicts one version of the cycle, the very one we see play out in Black Ops 3. But we do not know how many cycles there have been. There could have been hundreds, thousands, near infinite. We just don't know. We see many of them in the music trailers, or Ultimus instead of Primus Richtofen on Revelations in the comic books, or Nikolai saying he's killed many Richtofens on the Giants. In every case of these cycles, events play out slightly or even radically differently each time, but always leading to a similar reset. The Kronorium does not tell us about those. With Monty's comments about time once being linear, this proves to us that there must have been a very first cycle, a time before the fracturing of the universes for the very first time. The cycle is a paradox, and the cycle cannot have ever occurred without a time when time was once linear to set up events. This is the most hidden part of the COD Zombie storyline, the vaguest part that we know the least officially about. So it makes sense that this would make up the impossible Easter egg, the most shocking revelation that changes our perspective on the story's origins. And I saw this really good interpretation by the Golden Blood Initiate, and this was posted last year before all of the recent John Dee stuff has started to be discovered, and I 100% agree with this hypothesis because he said, let's stop and think for a second. Once we find the impossible Easter egg, how will we get confirmation that what we are looking at is actually the impossible Easter egg? Jason said it himself, there is no in-game coding that you will trigger or change anything. So let me ask you again, how will we know? What will change? If you ask me, it'll be our perception of the game. And this leads me back to the idea of John Dee and is why I became so compelled with it, because there's got to be some big revelation that'll let us know that this is it. And this completely changes our perception of the game and the storyline as a whole if it is in fact true. I can't imagine what else the impossible Easter egg could be that wouldn't just be underwhelming. And this completely aligns with what Jason said about the revelation ciphers being solved, allowing stuff to appear in the game.
I am sure there are people who are still working on some of those ciphers.
Oh, of course there is, yeah.
And I love that because there's other things that will appear.
Somehow when these things are solved, it'll change our perception. I'm sorry, but I don't mean to come across as condescending, but what are the odds that Treyarch have a document detailing an occultist who became immortal not being Monty?
The minute you people teleported for the first time, you changed the rules. But nonetheless, here we are. Bloody teleporters.
This really feels like an extension of that story. The document is referenced in the game with the de-resurrectionist being mentioned not just once in the ranking system, but also the Dreisendrach books, and Monty is the immortal god of the storyline. And he literally reads a passage from the perspective of a character many believe to be John Dee, and then it turns out that this is just not all connected. How are we supposed to believe that? I just find it so hard to believe. To me, this really is undeniable evidence. Sky talks about not latching onto things too deeply, and whilst I agree that's true for both of us and everyone looking into this in many ways, I think here is a case of the opposite. I think the obvious is lying here in plain sight, and it's going over some people's heads. The reception of my last video is so great. I really do think it's one of the best videos I've ever made, and so many people in the comments think it's one of the best zombies videos they've ever watched as well, and I'm so proud of it. It was so much fun to produce, and most people understood it and were so shooketh by this revelation, I included. I cannot believe this Easter egg could ever have actually ended up being something so important to the story itself and not just a nothing burger, which to be honest I thought for years. I thought if the impossible Easter egg was actually real, that if it's ever solved it would end up being nothing more than a simple message from Treyarch thanking us, or something not that important or that we already knew, similar to when the final Dreisendrach cipher was solved years later but told us what we already knew by that point. This is more exciting than any of our wildest dreams in my opinion. Whilst obviously yes, the hunt is supposed to be the funnest part of the impossible Easter egg, and not the solve itself, it would be extremely underwhelming if one day, even if it's hundreds of years in the future, someone finally cracks it and it doesn't actually mean anything. Surely Blundell would have foresight that he doesn't want to leave people disappointed. Obviously there's always going to be a percentage of people that are disappointed, even if it is the absolute best revelation, but I think this is as close as possible you are going to get to a perfect scenario with the impossible Easter egg, where it changes the foundations of the story itself. So it isn't just a load of work which might have been fun along the way but ends up leading to nothing. I really think this is a litmus test for the community. You either get it completely and think it's the craziest thing ever and it brings you so much joy and excitement, or it's just unfathomable and you think it just can't possibly be it. Sometimes we can be looking at the most obvious things and it's still so hard for it to click. I hope that this video can help that click for you so you can feel that same excitement that myself and a lot of others in the community have been getting recently from this revelation. Even Dead Ended says he has many names but only one is real, as highlighted in my last video. The very map Monty talks to us for the first time. What's more is that the leaked documents actually confirm the Shadowman's rituals were indeed, pun intended, based on Dee and Kelly's summoning circles, / the Pack-a-Punch rock was based on their seal of God. This is something I didn't actually realise until just after posting the video, but I speculated this to be the case anyways. And in the Lovecraftian mythos, Dee was actually the one who transcribed the Necronomicon, which is largely the inspiration for the Kronorium. And something I completely didn't realise, but when I was making my recent videos on Zetsubo no Shima, it turns out through all of these years, John Dee was staring us in the face, because many of us in the community have made videos on the inspiration for the Apothicons, because such entities as the Magwas, the Parasites, and even the Shadowman himself have taken many inspirations from the Cthulhu mythos, and it turns out many of the images that we have been using in our videos that look very similar to what the creatures actually look like in the game isn't the actual version of the Necronomicon, but is this fictional John Dee Enochian translation of the Necronomicon, which both Dee and Edward Kelly worked on. I have seen many images of many of the creatures that people believe have inspired the Apothicons, but for the most part, most of the images do not look that similar, but all of the ones within Dee's version of the Necronomicon look eerily similar. This shows that Treyarch were looking at Dee's version of the Necronomicon specifically to help them come up with concepts and shape the storyline for the Apothicons and the Shadow Shadowman specifically, with the Enochian language being what the Apothicon language is based on. This to me gives a lot of credence that Edward Kelly is in fact the Shadowman. I mean, even just the obvious parallel, he's always seen wearing a hat, always, even though it doesn't match the Shadowman's at all. Also, Sky brings up in the video how Monty and the Shadowman are largely inspired by many other characters. E.g., Monty is inspired by H.G. Wells from the 1979 movie Time After Time, based on the Time Bandits novel. H.G. Wells is even played by Malcolm McDowell too, interestingly enough, who plays Monty too, so it's probably where they got the idea for the casting. He's essentially the omnipotent god of the universe and is only revealed near the end, similar to Monty suddenly and even jarringly first talking to us on Gorod Krovi, and suddenly being responsible for most of Zombies' nudging along with mystical items like the war weapons, perks, etc. And the KN-44 hypercube seems to be based on the map that holds the secrets of the universe granted to them at the end of the movie. As Sky highlights, the Shadowman is inspired by G-Man from Half-Life as well. I also know he's inspired by the manipulative shapeshifter Nyarlathotep from the Cthulhu mythos and some others. This is stuff we already knew though. Glitching Queen has talked about a lot of this in prior videos, and I had some people pointing it out in the comments of my videos too. The big difference is though, whilst these inspirations helped shape their characters, I believe that's not supposed to be as simple of a case with Monty and the Shadowman and Dee and Kelly. I believe that they are meant to actually be them in the story, and that's what the impossible Easter egg will eventually tell us if we ever get to cracking this thing. We just skipped a few steps and got to the end first and are now backtracking through it, which would align with Blundell's quote about things, as in these clues I've been finding, then becoming obvious in game once some of the revelation ciphers or the decipher or ciphers are solved, because I think at least some of them will be about this. Also, deciphers are extremely hard and can hide numerous messages at once. Even if we get one message, there could theoretically be even more hidden within the same text, meaning that they could actually spell out much more than just what a simple singular message could on its own, and help put together the pieces of the story that are not currently making sense in a way that a singular cipher just could not. Maybe the way in which you get a message out of this is not exactly the way that Queen theorized, but I feel like there is definitely something there, whether it be my colours idea or something else. And I think that's the really fun thing with Call of Duty Zombies theories. Even if this Monty D theory ends up being false, I think that it's such a compelling idea that people are getting on board with, so much so that it's something that could even be made retroactively a part of the storyline, even if never originally intended, like so many of the things that have happened in the past. That I believe is one of the core pillars of what makes zombies so fun and mysterious. This is the magic embedded in its DNA, how the zombie storyline even first began with taking the fan idea of Sam. To close out this video, I have a few more leads I'm currently working on, but it's not enough / I can't make sense of it fully to make a proper video on, and I'm still working on the cycles video, but that would be more of a storyline video than an evidence-based one. In the meantime, I'm going to be speaking with Sky sometime soon, and I really want us all as a community to combine our collective brain power to try to get this thing solved. Sky and I will be brainstorming, and I really hope we make more progress. I will also leave a link to his Discord down in this video's description where you can drop any clues, leads, or your theories you have about this. Let's do this. Both of us have put an insane amount of work into this, and I'm sure there's many other people in the community that have been doing so as well. It requires all of our efforts, but that's where I'll leave you for now. I still firmly believe the big thing with this Easter egg is the D books, and that they will form a cipher or ciphers that will unveil Monty's true origins, which aligns with Blundell's Hidden Across Arenas quote.
And they'll be hidden in different arenas, and you won't get this one.
And it's also probably why Blundell said we were close to the impossible Easter egg after Der Eisendrache released.
Has that Easter egg been found?
It has not.
It has not. So there is still something in Shadows of Evil.
It would be too simple for me to say it's in Shadows of Evil, but I would say there is an Easter egg.
There is
not been found. There's actually lots. Right. But the one
there's a significant one.
The one I was specifically talking about has not.
We've got this unsolvable Easter egg, which I'm sort of guessing there might be more than one of.
There might be.
There might be, right? Is it something we've come at all close to, even just in the right sort of zone in Black Ops 3 so far?
Yes.
We have. Wow.
Before Black Ops 3, and you're like, I'm going to put an unsolvable Easter egg.
Yes.
What I will ask, because obviously I don't want it like straight cut.
Sure.
Has anyone gotten even remotely close? I think you answered this like.
Yeah, I've
during
seen people get close. Yeah.
You've seen people get close.
I've seen
Okay.
people get close on a couple of things.
I don't think close as in close to solving it, but close as in we were literally standing right by the books. Even opening the vault in the quest without understanding the significance at the time. I will see you with more impossible Easter egg videos to come once there is enough tangible evidence. Bye.